Good evening, everyone. Welcome to yet another round of Edelweiss Connect. I am Deepak Jain. I'm your host for the day. I had sales for Edelweiss Asset Management. Uh, One thing which keeps changing and one thing which does not change with equity markets talk about. Um, the thing that keeps changing are the market levels and the prices of stocks, your NAVs, etc. With every day, movement in the market. So that keeps changing. Companies' fortunes keeps changing. The results keeps changing. One thing that never change is the uncertainty that surrounds the market whenever you want to invest. Whether it's January, a lot of optimism. Whether it's March, um, first instance of the world being hit by COVID, and the uncertainties around how the economy is going to shape up, what kind of impact it will have on prices, and it shows in how the markets behave and react. Similarly, if we look at today's environment, the markets are on top and yet we are nervous. In March, markets were at the bottom and we were nervous. Today, markets are at the top and we are nervous. So, this nervousness actually comes from the uncertainty, which is very, very consistent when we invest in equity markets. So, we need a context, we need a perspective to be able to make our decisions in the right proportion and in the right magnitude whenever we decide to take those decisions. So when we invest in equity market, there are risks obviously around it. Sometimes the risk is whether you lose your capital or if you will make enough money or not. The risk at this point in time, we believe, is that the risk is of not investing enough in equity markets and hence losing out on opportunities from a medium to long term perspective. Why do we think so that it is risky to be underweight Indian equities? To talk about it, we have with us our head of equities, our CIO equities, Harshad Patwardhan. Harshad carries a rich experience with him of being an equity analyst, of doing research for a very long period of time before joining JP Morgan as a head of equities way back in 2007. And he carried that work even after the JP Morgan schemes were taken over by Edelweiss in 2017. With such a vast experience of having seen the markets from very close quarters, I think it's the right time for us to take and listen to Harshad what he has to say and ask for his perspective on why he thinks that it is very risky to be underweight Indian equities. Over to you, Harshad.
Thank you, Deepak. Good evening, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining. What we plan to do now is to run you through a very brief presentation that we have prepared on this theme. So let me start. Now, when we are making this presentation, and Deepak nicely gave the context of this and also remembered about March this year when they were all hit by this crisis and the market was crashing. I remember I don't know how many of you were there on that call, but we did a similar call for our distribution partners and investor partners at that point of time. And at that point of time, frankly, there was absolutely no visibility. We frankly didn't know what hit us. But one thing that was very, very clear, and I think we gave that message loud and clear, that this is the worst time to redeem. I'm reminding of March, when the market from, I think, third week of Feb to March had corrected quite significantly. And it was obvious to us at that point of time that this is probably the worst time to redeem, because market were factoring in something that was the worst case scenario. If some of you recall, we had also mentioned that if you look at any stock, how it is typically priced using the discounted cash flow method, the first 1 or 2 years, if you take, whether you take dividend discount model or free cash flow discount model, first couple of years account for barely 5 to 10% of the overall value of the asset. And which is why we said that a worst thing to do would be to redeem. Now I think we are 7-8 months down the line, fast forward. We know how this crisis has played out. And at this point of time, and I will deal with some of those issues, I believe that there is a raging debate that is happening in our industry and in investor distributor community, as to what should one do now, because there are n number of views. There is a view taken and sort of our conclusion from this is that it's rather risky to be underweight on Indian equities now compared to what you think is your model allocation to Indian equities. Let me start with a topical thing. The first slide, I hope the first slide will be visible soon. It's called vaccine trigger. So good news is that immediately after the US election results were announced, and we saw Mr. Trump complaining about it too, that two companies, and if you count AstraZeneca, then three companies have actually announced that if the vaccine that they are working on is proving to be very effective, 95% efficiency. I recall that on many of the calls that we did with our distribution partners, I highlighted one fact, that this particular crisis actually started in the healthcare domain. And to that extent, this crisis is very different from the crises that we have seen in the capital markets, in the financial markets earlier. So 2008 crisis started in the US mortgage markets, as we know. Then in Europe, we had a sovereign debt crisis. But the genesis of this particular crisis, that probably began somewhere around a year ago, and we all became more aware of it in March. It was a healthcare crisis, and a healthcare crisis would need a solution also coming from the healthcare field. And that is something that I have highlighted a few times. Without a medical solution, either in terms of a treatment or in terms of a vaccine, we will not know the duration of the crisis and also the extent of the crisis. Good news is that finally a medical solution is here. Clearly, the challenge now is how to effectively distribute these vaccines, all over the world. And by the way, 3 companies have announced that their vaccines are effective after phase 3 trials. But I read somewhere that work is going on globally on 130 vaccines totally. Not all of them will be successful, but the point is that there will be many more candidates for vaccines that will come in the weeks and months ahead. The challenge remains as that of effective distribution, and it is a significant challenge. But the point that I want to highlight with this slide is that at least with these vaccines coming out, and there will be sort of emergency approvals that I think the regulators will give them, there is definitely a beginning of the end of the crisis that we have all been living through for the past 9 to 10 months. And to that extent, one should not reduce the importance of this news flow. The other point that I want to highlight, I've changed the slide, hopefully it will appear very soon on your screens. The second positive point, is that Indian economy has at last bottomed out. What you see on slide 3, I have given the GDP quarterly trends up to first quarter of FY21, where that reading is about minus 24 to 25 on real GDP. These are actual numbers. The next few numbers are forecast of different economists. And I believe the real GDP number for second quarter is going to be announced on 27th. I think that's today. So sometime we will hear the news. But the unmistakable sort of estimates coming from economists is that in first quarter, that is April, May, June quarter of 2020, Indian economy has bottomed out. It is expected to improve sequentially. The next slide I have is a similar chart, but on a longer time frame, on an yearly basis. I hope that slide is also visible to all of you. Slide number 4. Clearly, it shows the dip in FY21. But what I would like you to spend a few seconds on is that even before the COVID crisis hit us about a year ago, if you look at the blue line, which is the real GDP print, Indian economy has been decelerating well before the COVID crisis hit us. So if you look at period from FY 17, 18, 19, 20, Indian economy has been steadily decelerating. And the reasons for these decelerations, just to recap, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but this background is very important when we are looking ahead. We saw over the course of last 3 to 4 years several India-specific events which were big disruptions, and I don't want to go into the merits of these. But we saw a 2017, we saw hasty implementation
Harshad,
of
I think you need to
GST.
check your network, please.
Then 2 years ago, we saw the ILFS crisis. Before that, we saw a RERA implementation, and so on. And then came this particular health crisis. So the point is that Indian economy was decelerating even before that. And this was, of course, a big knock that led to, on a quarterly number basis, 25% dip in economic activity in April, May, June quarter. The good news is that the Indian economy has finally bottomed out, and the expectation is that, of course, FY21 number will still be negative. But the FY21 number, I recall, this particular number is from a particular economist, but there was a wide range. If I recall, the range was from -5-6% to all the way to -12-13% contraction in real GDP in FY21. Many people are saying that after the second quarter rate is announced, today, tomorrow, there is likely to be a big revision, the upward revision to the GDP number for FY21. But it's very, very important from the market's perspective. I would say that the trend change is many times more important than the quantum itself. And I think that change of trend is unmistakable, that after years of deceleration, Indian economy will start to look up. I'm changing the slide to slide number 5. It will be soon visible. There I show rather a long-term EPS number for Nifty companies as a proxy for, I know that this is a large cap proxy, but these are the numbers that are more reliably available. For a broader universe, unfortunately, these numbers are not that reliably available. What I want to talk about is the corporate performance. And all of us are aware, and all of us have been frustrated for a long, long time about the tepid growth in earnings for Indian corporates. And the backdrop to that tepid growth, particularly over the last several years, was the fact that Indian economy, unfortunately, was decelerating. And that got reflected because ultimately corporate India is sort of a levered play on economic activity. So it's not a surprise that the earnings growth was rather tepid. Before I go to what lies ahead, I'm sure many of you would have closely analyzed the second quarter operating results of Indian corporates. I'm talking about July, August, September quarter. And frankly, those numbers were very surprising. There was a positive surprise. On an aggregate basis, of course, depending on what sample you take, the numbers will vary. But the revenue growth was negative in many cases, but the operating profit was actually positive. So that came as a big surprise. And of course, that was because of the good cost containment effort done by corporate India. When I talk about corporates here, I am talking about a set of corporates which are listed. So by definition, these are the corporates which are probably the biggest and the best, more organized in nature. So I know that there is a lot of pain that MSMEs have suffered, a lot of pain that the vendors of many of these companies have suffered. But we are talking about publicly listed companies, and they have done a very good job in terms of cost containment. Of course, there are implications for others in the system of that. And after a very, very long time, in my memory, there has been an earning upgrade for FY21 and FY22 numbers. In fact, there has been an earning upgrade after a really long time, because we look at these numbers, very, very closely. So just as Indian economy has bottomed out, as I showed you in the last two charts, it's important to recognize that the earnings growth trajectory of Indian corporates is also moving higher. So I don't want to get stuck in the absolute numbers that are displayed here, because these are numbers of a particular economist or a particular team. But what I want to focus on is that after a very, very lackluster 2% earnings growth for almost 6 years, we are going to see earnings trajectory moving up. And that is very important for the markets, because, once again, let me reiterate that many times the trend change is more important, or the derivative is more important for the markets rather than the absolute numbers. I'm moving to slide number 6. Although it could not really deliver fiscal stimulus because government was very constrained on the fiscal side, as all of us are aware, government did push through important reforms. So agriculture laws were passed, all of us are aware, and in some states that has created some problem. Also, what has remained below radar rather, any laws, any kind of moment for India. So that's a good news. So what we have seen over the past several months was a renewed focus on manufacturing. Atmanirbhar initiative, which basically talks about, and purposely I have chosen price to book as a valuation metric, because earning numbers, because of the uncertainty for FY21, earning numbers are all over the place, although they have all been upgraded now. But on a price to book value basis, the market is fairly close to the average. And as you can see on the right hand side chart, return on equity has also started trending up. The next slide is very, very interesting and very important. Slide number 8, that there is a big divergence in the behavior of foreign investors and domestic investors. So I'm sure all of you are aware that foreign investors have been buying significantly into Indian markets. So if I am not mistaken, this particular month of November, where the number from FIIs will be probably, I think it is very close to the record, if not the record itself. Just to put this in perspective, in the month of March, when this news or this crisis had just started, FIIs had sold $8.4 billion in a single month of March 2020. In November 2020, FIIs have probably bought, we don't have the numbers today, but FIIs have probably bought in excess of $8 billion. And they have been buying. So left-hand side chart that you see are the yearly numbers, whereas the right-hand side chart are the monthly numbers for this particular year. And as you can see, there is a divergence, because we know that domestic investors have been significantly redeeming. And I don't know whether this will be probably the worst month as far as redemptions from domestic mutual funds is concerned. But it's very interesting that there is a divergence in the behavior of two types of investors. And the expectation going forward, I've read several reports, I'm sure you would have read many reports also, is that the expectation is that because of the US dollar weakness, the inflows into emerging markets are going to significantly improve. So just as India has received lots of inflows, many other markets also. So India is not, is not an exception, but it's part of the emerging market inflows that have been coming, and India is benefiting from that. And the expectation is that in the years ahead, that inflow is likely to continue. So foreign flows are likely to be very benign. Now on the next slide, that's slide number 9, I'm going to summarize why we believe Indian equities may continue to do well from a medium-term perspective. First point is Indian economy is past its worst. And Deepak just sent me a message saying that the 2Q economic growth number is out, and Indian economy shrank by 6.5% against the expectation or fear of 10 to 12%. So the recovery has been rather smart. So that's first point, that Indian economy is past its worst. Second point, and we went through in some detail, that earnings growth is likely to accelerate to a higher trajectory. Third, tail risk in BFSI sector seem to be well contained. And this is an important point because this is one sector, as all of us know, is extremely levered to the economy. And for the past several months, everybody, analysts, credit rating agencies, I'm sure RBI and the government were very worried as to what will be the implications for the banking and financial services sector. However, if you look at some of the results and more importantly, the commentary coming from the big banks, what suggests is that what we feared, the worst sort of outcome that all of us thought will happen in month of March, April, the reality seems to be much better than the feared outcome. So the tail risk in the BFSI seem well contained. Also, let me remind you that many banks successfully managed to raise capital, equity capital, so that they have buffers built in case things go out of hand. So that's a very important point for the stability of the overall economy. Next one, we talked about it, big structural reforms that the government has undertaken over the past few years that will lift potential growth rates. And many of these decisions, it would have been difficult to do in more normal times. Second last point is there is definitely a global risk-on rally that's happening. Foreign investors are investing about emerging markets, including India. We talked about the flows. And the last one, which was the first slide we had, was the vaccine trigger is finally here, which basically means that we can now see the beginning of the end of the healthcare crisis, which is why we believe our hypothesis is that Indian equities may continue to do well from a medium-term perspective. So what's our advice to our distribution partners as a result of this? So our sincere submission is to please reconsider your asset allocation. I can understand the background and talk about since March, after the big fall in March, has rather unnerved investors. Just as people were very fearful in March and therefore, the prices were falling off the cliff. Now that the market has gone up, investors are unnerved. And I think legitimate questions are being asked about the disconnect between fundamentals and the equity levels, market levels. And that has led to, I believe, big redemptions over the course of last several months. However, we do believe that, for the reasons that we have listed, I just enumerated those reasons, we believe that it's time to reevaluate the stance. Because, as I said, the economy has bottomed out, corporate earnings growth is moving to a higher trajectory, government seems to be also focused on growth and probably no more disruptions. And therefore, being underweight on equities, just as in March we said that redemption will be a bad idea, I believe that being underweight compared to your model allocation could lead to opportunity loss. So please ask yourself whether your clients are underexposed to domestic equities. In our opinion, if the answer to that is yes, it's time to consider whether you want to increase the exposure to domestic equities. Also, I must add the final point, which is very, very relevant always in the markets, that volatility and corrections are part of the game, right? So markets having done, so well in November, from time to time corrections will happen. So our view is more medium term, that because of the reasons explained, medium term we expect markets to do well. But yes, you should always expect volatility and corrections to be part of the game. Let me move to my last slide before we stop and go to question answers. And this is a slide that you should also consider, when you think about the hypothesis that I just explained. I am on slide number 11 now, risk to our hypothesis. So what could go wrong as far as our hypothesis is concerned? The first one, which we should definitely consider because we are in the midst of second or third wave, depending on which city you are in. So subsequent infection waves, the risk is whether they will derail the economic activity. And we have seen a bit of that in Europe and also in US, also, I guess in Delhi and in a few other cities, in India also, we have seen second and third waves. But what I believe, And this is a risk that we have to keep in mind, as if things go out of hand, the government will be forced to take a very, very severe action. But my assessment here is that the governments are in no mood to go for big national lockdowns. Yes, there will be local lockdowns and temporary small, 1 week, 2 week kind of lockdowns. But I think government had seen, and there was a raging debate. I'm sure all of us participated in that debate as to the cost of this. So lives versus livelihood. And I believe that, it's very unlikely, in my opinion, unless things go really, really out of hand in terms of infections, that a national lockdown will come. So I believe that the government wants continuing recovery in economic activity. But nevertheless, that's a risk we have to keep in mind. The second risk is global risk of events. And again, this is something that is inherently unpredictable. But we have to remember that that could be a negative trigger. So if again under the new administration, if US, China again start fighting on trade or on some other areas, it could have a rub-off effect on the markets. So there could be n number of global risk of events. The third one is Indian government going back on key reforms. I mentioned that one of the positives from a government side were initiation of good reforms. Again, I don't think it is likely, but we should definitely ponder over this. That I believe there is a big farmer rally that is likely to happen in Delhi. If government comes under pressure and goes back on the reforms in agriculture, I think it will be taken as a negative. But again, I don't think the chances of that are very high. Fourth point, very important, global central banks reversing the benign monetary policy. I think one of the reasons why we saw the big bounce in the markets to start with, and the continuation of the risk of trade, risk on trade, is the behavior of the central banks. So they have sort of underwritten this kind of economic recovery and the pumping of money. So we have to watch for that. The current expectation is that the easy monetary policy is likely to continue for some more time. And lastly, the unknown and the unknowable. I think we should always list that, because hardly anybody expected or predicted a COVID crisis to come in the first place. So there are always risks which are unknown and unknowable. I think with this, I will pause here. I probably took longer than what I would have thought, but let me hand it back to Deepak for question answers.
So thanks a lot, Harshad. For the sake of bandwidth, I am not switching on my video. What I'll do is I'll summarize the few questions that I can see our participants have posted on the chat window. So Harshad, you mentioned about the fact that the Indian government, whether it's the government itself or RBI, the heavy lifting was done on the monetary side, and fiscal policy, the powder has still been kept dry, or perhaps there was not much ammunition given the state of affairs. So what do you think as far as interest rates are concerned and its impact on valuations? The fact that the interest rates have come down considerably, what impact does it have on valuation on a general basis? And in this specific case, is it playing out to the advantage of asset class investors, whether it's equity or otherwise?
Yes, I think it's a very important question. That yes, interest rates do play a very, very significant role in valuation. All of us have done this probably in our graduate school. That interest rates is very, very the valuation of assets are very sensitive to interest rates, including for equity asset class. So yes, softening of the rates, or softening of the risk-free rate, more importantly, is very important. And yes, that has taken up the fair value of all assets, including equities. For our sort of official view or the current view on interest rates, maybe we should talk to our fixed income colleagues. But the expectation is that the rates will probably stay benign for some more time to come. I do recognize that inflation has started becoming at least a near-term issue, if not a long-term issue. But because globally the rates are likely to stay benign, I think expectation in context of India also is that they probably may not fall too much from here, but rates will stay soft. and that will play a big role also, I believe, in the economic recovery itself, apart from its implications for asset prices.
Thanks a lot, Harshad.
Yeah, just one thing, Deepak, if I may add a continuation. So
Please.
the issue is both the cost of money and the availability of money. I think availability of money is also has also significantly improved, and we should thank RBI for that.
Yeah. Thanks, Harshad. I also wanted to understand, since any valuation has to look into account the risk-free rate of return and an expected rate of return and discount the cash flows accordingly. So in that context, if your risk-free rate of return and expected rate of returns have come down considerably, doesn't it have a long-term impact on valuation is something that we wanted to perhaps. But I think you have covered it well. Harshad, the second point that people are asking is that what could be the possible triggers for 21, 22 and beyond earnings for some of the companies that we manage?
Sorry, I don't think I understood the question, Deepak. Can you?
What are the possible triggers for earnings growth for the corporate India from an FY22 and FY23 perspective is the question.
Okay, so I think one of the biggest triggers for earnings growth has to come from economic growth itself. And as I mentioned previously, you should look at Indian corporate sector or corporate sector in any country as a kind of a levered play on economy, right? It's a subset of the economy, and it's a levered play on the economy. So when economy is decelerating, which means that the rate of growth is falling, that's a very, very bad news for the earnings growth prospects of corporate India, right? Which is what we saw. So Indian economic growth till FY20 was still positive, right? It was falling, but it was positive from 7% to, let's say, 4.5%. But in that period, we saw a very, very meager, almost flat kind of growth rate for corporate earnings. So one of the biggest triggers for corporate earnings trajectory moving up is the acceleration in the economic growth. So economic growth, let's say, is going to be minus 5% in FY21. And in FY22, on, of course, a weak base, let's say it is 9 to 10%. So this acceleration of economic growth, and it will play out on a quarterly basis, that itself will be a big trigger. So economic activity accelerating, there can be no better trigger than that. In addition to that, and this is, we are talking about Indian economy. What is also happening is that there is going to be a synchronous recovery in the global economy. Because just as we saw GDP numbers for quarterly numbers for India, if you go to any other country, barring probably China, we saw a big dip in growth. So in fact, shrinkage of the economy, and then slowly sequential improvement and a bounce back. I think that pattern is there pretty much everywhere. So many of the global strategy reports are also talking about synchronous recovery in global economy, and that will also be positive for Indian exporters. So these two, I think the growth reversing from a negative to positive itself is going to be a big growth, a big trigger for Indian economy. In addition to that, the government focus on growth is very important, which basically means that the kind of disruptions that we saw over the 4 years, which I listed, the expectation is that there will be no such disruption. Both RBI and the government are focused on growing the economy. That is priority number one. All the other agendas of the government, social agendas, are done now, more or less. So focus on growth, low, ample credit availability, low cost of credit, and government incentive, sectoral incentive. And that is, I think, a big delta. We have never seen government of India giving production link kind of linkages across various sectors. So all these put together, I believe, will catalyze the earnings growth for corporate India.
Thanks a lot, Harshad. So liquidity also plays a very important role in determining asset prices, across the world. And we have seen this period has been, and for a long period of time, to be fair, we have seen easy liquidity, practiced by global central banks. Do you see this liquidity continuing to drive asset prices, especially on the equity side? And what could be a possible trigger for any reversal that central banks may undertake on this liquidity stance?
Sure. So, therefore, Deepak, if you recall, we have listed that as one of the risk factors that central banks, if they were to reverse their policy of being benign with their monetary policy, that definitely remains a risk and a trigger. But if you go by what has been articulated by these central banks, and because frankly, because I'm not from fixed income side, I may be getting the numbers or the exact wording wrong. But I think at least for the next couple of years, there is almost sort of I won't say a guarantee, but a comfort given by central banks that the policy will remain benign. In fact, if I recall correctly, in US there has been a paradigm shift, saying that they will look at inflation on an average basis rather than looking at as soon as the inflation touches 2%, that there will be a reversal in the benign monetary policy. What I think they are saying now, and pardon me if I'm getting some facts wrong here, but essentially the message they are giving is that they are going to look at inflation on an average basis, which is another signal that the policy will remain benign even though inflation starts to inch up. And that, I think, is a very, very big, important comfort required for asset prices. But yes, if that were to get reversed, maybe 2 years, 3 years down the line, I think that will be a negative trigger.
Thanks a lot, Harshan. We have seen that globally, consumption as a segment has done well. Even in India, domestically, consumption as a segment has done well. Do you think that it's time also for cyclicals and infra-related sectors to do well? And if so, why do you think so?
So yes, consumption has done well. And if you look at India, what has been missing in the India story for a long time now, of course, there were many false starts in between, but for a long time, private capital expenditure has been rather missing, right? So on the capex side, government has done a lot of heavy lifting through infrastructure projects, etc. I think it will probably remain that way for some more time. But clearly, I do see some green shoots in that. So one thing that I would like to highlight, and again, this is coming after a very prolonged period of extremely tough time for this industry. But we have seen some encouraging signals of residential property starting to pick up. And I'm not talking about prices here. I'm talking about the volumes. So that is very encouraging, because this is one of the big sectors of the Indian economy, which has been going through extremely tough times right from demonetization or even before that. So there were shocks after shocks for that industry. Of course, there was a big change that happened in this industry. And when I say this, let me also say that that particular trend we have witnessed in many industries, that the focus from or the shift from unorganized to organized. I think in real estate, that is very, very visible. But we have also seen it in many other sectors like NBFCs and so on. So this is one sector of the economy which is inching up. And if the recovery continues, then the investment will happen. And as you know, real estate is one industry which has very, very strong linkages through the economy. That real estate starting to do well means many other product categories will also start to do well. So that is encouraging. It is also partly reflected, if you look at the commentary from cement companies, for example. I'm not going to name any stock, but industry-wise, cement industry is also, is very encouraged by what they are seeing on the ground. So I believe that yes, private capex has been missing. Government has been doing a lot of heavy lifting, and that they will continue on the infrastructure side. But if this growth rate sustains, then at some stage, maybe a year and a half, 2 years down the line, we will see return of private capex. Also, I must add again, at this point, probably I've highlighted a couple of times before, but I think it's worth reiterating here, is that Government of India, after a long time, is encouraging investment in manufacturing. And that is also catalyzing private capex. For example, as you know, electronic manufacturing services is one area that they have picked for production link incentives. They have also widened the whole ambit of the PLI scheme. So, APIs, chemicals, and many other sectors are being food processing. So government is also taking concrete steps. Also, we must not forget that government reduced the corporate taxes, right? And for new companies, greenfield companies, their tax rate is even lower. So I think government is doing whatever it can within the fiscal constraints that they face to encourage private capex. So I think Deepak, even on that front, probably the worst part is probably over, and we are seeing encouraging signs. We should also remember that a lot of foreign investment is also coming into India. If you look at the FDI numbers, they have also been looking encouraging. Deepak, over to you.
So there's one question which keeps coming to our mind as investors, Arshad, is looking at valuations, and over the years our mind has been pegged to look at valuations from a PE perspective. But this year is a very different year where E is missing from that equation or partly missing from that equation. So how should an investor look at valuations? If not PE, then what?
So that's why, Deepak, because the range of outcomes has been so wide as far as the GDP number was concerned. Earnings, FY21 earnings was fraught with risk because you can't really pin down the earnings to start with, which is why I have shown the price to book as so. In times like these, very uncertain times, I think you can look at price to book. So clearly, I will not claim that on a price to book basis, things are valuations are a no-brainer, because they are close to average. They are not significantly below average. But if you looked at FY20, very expensive. My point is that on a price to book basis, we are close to the average. Also, we should remember that whenever things are turning, economy is going from big negative to small positive. When the earning trajectory is changing, always on a price to earning basis, even in normal times, valuations look more expensive than they actually are. If the earning upgrades continue, then you will find that unfortunately for a long time we have not seen earning upgrades. As I mentioned, in this quarter, we saw earning upgrades. So if the upgrade cycle starts, then the actual valuation that appears is actually more expensive than it actually is. So I think these are a couple of points that I think we should keep in mind while looking at valuations.
Great, Arshad. This new trend of from investors' perspective, managers, advisors, of looking at markets from a large cap, mid cap, small cap, and micro cap perspective, and trying to see which is the segment which looks more attractive. So from that perspective, Harshad, what do you think from a market cap perspective, which segment looks more attractive? If you were to bet from a 5 to 7 year perspective, where would you put a higher weightage if it were your personal allocation, and why so? And there's a follow-up question with regards to multi-cap fund. What are we going to do with our multi-cap fund, and how will we manage the various market caps in that fund?
Okay. So, before coming to that question straight away, as a background, we should recall that last 2 years, 2018 and 2019, were the years when large caps, handsomely outperformed mid caps and small caps. We all, remember that. And even within large caps, if you recall that the rally in the indices was very narrow. A handful of stocks. I remember at any given point of time, there was a time when only 4-5 stocks were driving the Sensex, and at different points of time, a set of different 5-7 stocks. So it has not been a broad-based market for the last 2 years. In that context, we do believe, and frankly, it is playing out also, that we believe the broader markets will do well, and as a result, mid caps and small caps at the index level itself, we believe will outperform the large cap index. If you look at data from in the calendar year 20, and almost 11 months are over, you will notice that year to date also mid caps have done better than large caps, and small caps have done broadly in line with mid caps. We believe that this trend will probably continue because we are going into a phase of economic recovery, which will start in pockets, but it will spread because, as we discussed, many stars are aligned, and that will reflect in the broad-based recovery. So therefore, to the second question, the longer your time horizon, the chances are that you will make probably more returns in the broader market in mid caps and small caps. As far as a multi-cap fund is concerned, we are very actively looking to convert that into the new category that has been introduced by the regulator. And so as soon as we take some decision, we will communicate it to you. I think the size of our multi-cap fund is such that when time comes, we can shift from large caps to mid caps and small caps relatively easily. The large AUM funds will probably not be able to do that. Having said that, we will do that more from a bottom-up perspective rather than taking a top-down call and on how much to shift to in mid caps and small caps.
Thanks a lot, Harshad. My next question, I'll read out the question, Harshad, and I would request you to hold on to your answer before you start answering that question. So the question is with regards to RBI's proposal around allowing greater participation from corporates, etc., into Indian banking system as owners. What could be a possible impact of that in the Indian banking system and the fabric of the entire environment around the banking system? So I just want you to hold on to that answer, because I just want to take this opportunity to answer a few questions around some of the other funds which are not related to today's discussion. So the questions are around whether should we be investing in international funds and in what proportion. So let me just take a minute or two to explain you our views around it. See, international investing is also like investing into your own equities domestically. They also carry the same risk return matrix as would be available for Indian domestic investing. But yes, there are many opportunities. Sometimes the opportunities are in the form of geographical diversification. Sometimes opportunities are in the form of segment that could be interesting in a global market. So for example, we have an emerging market fund, we have a Europe fund, we have a US value fund, we have an ASEAN fund, we have a Greater China fund. These are the funds which cater to various geographies. And if you have a view on some of these geographies, you are more than welcome to invest into our funds. The detailed commentary is available on our website. So for example, if you want to take an emerging market exposure in general, we have an emerging market fund. We also have a fund which caters to new age disruptive technology. It's called Edelweiss US Technology Fund. So there are multiple funds like we have domestically, and no one fund can be an answer to all your needs. But in general, Indian investors have not shown too much of love for global equities. If you look at the Indian mutual fund industry as a example, we have roughly 10 lakh crores invested across equity and hybrid schemes, and only 7,000 crores are invested internationally. So I would say that anywhere between 5 to 10% of your portfolio, domestic mutual fund portfolio, can be invested into international funds, depending upon your risk appetite. And I would urge you to either speak to your advisor or take a more nuanced and informed approach in investing into international funds. There has been a popular demand from our investors as well as partners to talk more about international funds. We'll have another session on the same, so I will not take too much of time on that. Over to you, Harshad.
Okay. So to this,
on the banking side, corporate.
Am I audible? Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah, Harshad.
Okay, I thought there was an echo. So on that front, we should remember that what has come out are the internal working group's recommendations. Okay, they have not been accepted. So anybody can comment on them, I think till 15th of Jan. So I don't think we should jump the gun saying that this is going to be implemented in toto. Because particularly on the issue of allowing corporates, giving them banking license, there are very, very strong opinions against. And some of the people have expressed those opinions also. So also we should remember that there are from time to time various committees that RBI appoints. They submit report, and it's possible that some of those recommendations are not. So I don't think we should believe that necessarily all the recommendations will be implemented. That is a very important point. I personally believe that some of the other recommendations that in some of the structures that have been introduced, collapsing of that with the bank, I think probably there is a higher chance that we will implement it. That's now than before. I think you will hear and consider potential risks involved. I think the reason why corporates were not being given banking license, there is a logic. There was a logic to that. So I'm sure RBI will take a considered decision on that front. But so please don't take it as if it is happening tomorrow.
Thanks a lot, Harshad. There are questions around market timing, whether people should invest now or should redeem now. As you all know, that we don't really answer these questions because not because of lack of interest or a desire on our part, but because we don't know your asset allocation. We don't know
exactly
the time frame of your investment. I think these are questions best answered on a one-on-one basis, maybe with your advisor.
Yes.
Or if you want to ask these questions, I think you can write to us. But our job is to manage your money in the best possible manner as per the investment objective mentioned therein. And the managing of the portfolio from an asset allocation perspective is left to either an investor who's an informed one or through his advisor or her advisor. We really can't comment, and please excuse us for the same. Harshad, amongst your schemes, if you were to pick one for an investor who has to invest in equities and all those basic hygiene checks have already been done, which scheme would you recommend from a long-term investing, let's say 7-10 years time frame, and why so?
Okay, so Deepak, again, what you mentioned for the previous question, that is also applicable as to what are the initial conditions. So, what is the characteristic of the investor, etc., etc. So, assuming that investor has risk appetite and has, as you said, 7 to 10 years ahead of him, then I will say that he can consider a small cap fund or a mid cap fund, because that is where inherently, of course, the volatility in that segment will be on a higher side. But somebody having a real long-term horizon, I'm assuming that will not mind the inherent volatility in these asset classes. But the way we run these funds, we believe that investors in these funds will benefit both from relatively faster earnings growth in case of smaller businesses, as well as any opportunities for valuation re-rating. So therefore, the longer the time horizon and higher the risk appetite, chances are that investors can make higher returns compared to let's say large caps. But at the same time, if somebody has a relatively lower risk appetite, then our other two funds, which are multi-cap fund or large and mid-cap fund, which is also like a sort of a conservative multi-cap fund, I think these two are also good solutions if you don't want to straight away go to the higher risk mid-cap and small cap categories. Personally, Deepak, as you know, I've invested in all these schemes myself.
Thanks a lot, Harshad. Just for our viewers, our audience information, our mid-cap fund has been in existence and being managed by Harshad for almost 13 years. And the since inception return is upwards of 16%. And also our large and mid-cap fund, which earlier used to be JP Morgan India Equity Fund, have also completed a dozen years or so in the industry. So all these two funds are time-tested, well-managed, and have strong performance behind them over a longer period of time. So it's important to get your A, asset allocation call right, and B, your time horizon call right. There are questions around BAF. Harshad does not manage our hybrid category. So what I would do is that in brief, I would cover the questions around BAF, and then perhaps we'll take more questions on BAF on a detailed call. So BAF is a fund which is, a fund which is good for any kind of investor depending upon the time horizon, objective, and risk appetite. So for example, if you are an investor or maybe a first-time investor wanting to invest into Indian equities, don't really want too much of volatility or drawdown to surprise you or derail your journey, I think a balanced advantage or an asset allocation fund, whichever form you choose, is a very good option to choose. It gives you a stronger returns over a long period of time, higher than debt for sure, but it does so with a lower volatility, lower heart attack, lower drawdown, and so on and so forth. So I think balanced advantage fund is a good way to build your corpus over a medium to longer period of time, and it's also good for investors who have a lot of money and perhaps are nearing retirement, and because of low interest rates, the interest income may not be sufficient for their needs. So how do you build a product or a solution which can actually give you better returns than fixed income, at the same time don't take away your peace? So I think asset allocation funds solves that problem if you invest it for the right horizon and for the right objective. There is no right time to invest in asset allocation funds. In my view, you should keep investing slowly and steadily. And if you have a large corpus and if you have long enough time, then certainly there is no need to wait for a right time, because the timing part is taken care by the fund's own asset allocation moving between debt and equity. There are questions around real estate, bond, etc. This call is for equity investing, and we have tried to answer most of the questions around equity investing. There are some questions which may have got left, and I'm unable to take it because of lack of time. We have already exceeded our time by 7 minutes. I don't want to take more time than we have already taken. I would like to thank all of you who have participated in strong numbers today. Thanks a lot. Because of your support and love, we have been able to grow our business. We have been able to deliver superior risk-adjusted returns to our customers, and we are really proud of that fact. Harshad, if you want to make any final comments.
Sure. No, once again, I will echo what you said. Thanks a lot for your support. And the whole, if you want to take one conclusion from this today's discussion, the core topic that we discussed, is that what's important is, what Deepak said, the initial conditions are very, very important. So if you are, all we are saying is that if you are underexposed to domestic equity, I think you should review your position, because of the reasons we mentioned. We believe that this is a big change. Many of the factors are aligning favorably for Indian markets to do well from a medium-term perspective. You should always be mindful that there will be corrections from time to time, and there will be volatility. I'm sure many of you have seen probably decades in the market, so you shouldn't get perturbed by that. And many times you can use the volatility to your advantage by spreading your investment. But one message is that if you are underexposed to equity, please, give a serious thought as to whether you want to change that. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much for joining.
Thanks, Harshad. There is just one final point I just wanted to make. There have been a lot of questions around what is long-term, short-term, medium-term, etc., and for how long should one be investing. I think I follow a very, very simple rule. If you are investing for anything less than 3 years, then neither equity nor hybrid funds are the funds for you. For pure equity funds, whether it's a large cap or a mid cap fund, the minimum investment horizon should be 5 years or even more in case of mid and small cap. Once these basic checks are done, I think your investment experience is going to be reasonably strong. So with that, I would like to close today's